Unrepresented party acknowledgement. This is probably came in after August 17th, right? Thinking that this was going to be kind of the way things were going to be moving forward. I haven't seen it that much, but I think we're going to start seeing more and more of it as time goes on. So, great disclosure just goes through, talks about the unrepresented party. In my opinion, remember, unrepresented still have to have duties owed, because you're kind of the intermediary, even though they're acknowledging being unrepresented. So this is just the acknowledgement talking about, what they're doing, the risks that they're taking, how they're inheriting risks, the advantages of using, realtor, but kind of leaving it as your own discretion.
And it could be a useful tool in trying to encourage an unrepresented buyer to actually seek representation.
Is that steering?
No, but I think that it's an encouraging conversation that you could have with somebody that may walk into an open house that you have, listing. And say, oh, I'm going to represent myself. Okay, well, that's great. I need you to read and sign this form.
When was that?
This just came, this just came out.
Oh, that just came out. So
Yeah, it's a new form.
I have a lease option
Uh-huh.
and an unrepresented buyer. Should I have them sign it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been almost a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would go back.
Yeah.
Right, because it hasn't been,
Nope.
consummated,
Right.
all the way through. So yeah, 100%. That's what I would do. Just to be, again, on the safer side, we're becoming more and more like California. I mean, lots of disclosures and forms and nonsense of stuff, but some of the stuff actually
Makes sense.
makes sense.
Right. And as far as steering goes, in my opinion, is more when you're trying to encourage one neighborhood or area over another. Is where you have to be really careful, where we eliminated all the areas in our MLS as a result of potential steering. So informing an unrepresented buyer as far as how they are not represented or what their rights or what their limitations are is, I think.
But I can see a buyer or whoever is unrepresented, whether a buyer or seller, saying, well, the realtor gave me this and then I got nervous and then so I went with them, but I really didn't want to use one. And that it kind of I thought I was, I could see how it could.
I think
be
at that
pushed
point,
upon someone.
I wouldn't be encouraging them to use me as much as I would say,
You
I'm
just
going to
make it
refer
your-
you
right.
to another agent in my office. Get a referral fee, and then that way you'd have your representation. We're not doing a dual agency situation, but that would maybe protect you and create some layer.
Yeah, I mean, how many people have done a transaction where you have an unrepresented party on the buying, like you represent seller, had an unrepresented buyer?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, aren't they chaotic? They want you to do all the work?
Pretty
Like,
much, yeah, that's.
you write it up, you do the work,
You take on.
I want you to schedule my
Yeah.
inspections. No, I can't do that.
Right.
One of the things I have always done, and not just via this word, that would be helpful, but in the notes section or the other section, I definitely put that there is represented. And then we still haven't signed the zone because it identifies that our responsibility is to both parties.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's fair.
When I do it, anytime they sign anywhere, I always put hyphenated unrepresented,
Yeah.
like in all caps. Like anywhere they sign, yeah.
Can I ask a question for you, Juan?
Always.
One of the areas, do you know if they're gonna update the MLS input form? It still has areas. Yes, they are.
In March. Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, I mean,
I'm sure as well.
they will.
For that.
There's-
Why not?
There's a lot of stuff that's lagging, that's not necessarily matching.
So if an unrepresented buyer comes to your listing, so for now on, we have to get them to sign this? Or,
Not
Not
necessarily,
yours.
it's not like if they come into an open house or
Alright.
anything, but if you get to the point in the conversation where they say, okay, we're interested, we want to write an offer on this house. Then at that point, I would,
if you write for them, then you have to have them
okay,
sign one.
and all right, establish, okay, how do you intend to proceed, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, customer? Okay, we want to represent ourselves. Okay, well then I'd like you to review this form before we go any further. And then they say, all right, sounds good, I'm willing and able to represent myself. And then at that point, what do you do?
I'm always super cautious about that, right? Because if they're like, well, can I get an offer and acceptance from you?
Right.
So you print it out and guess what logo it has on the corner? Yours, right? And so I'm super hesitant. I'll go back and be like, hey, do you have a offer and acceptance? I'm sure you could find some that are around there. There's professional publications, this and that. I would highly suggest go in, get one of those, fill it out, send it over.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What I did with my lease option is I presented an offer from the seller.
Mhm.
This is the seller's presenting this to you.
Yeah,
And you can sign it, and then he got an attorney to look at it. And so that's kind of how I got around to that.
totally. No, I think that's a
Is
great
that
call.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, very different, scenario.
Well, I got to control
yeah.
the terms
Totally.
and everything and
Yeah.
anyway.
So we don't have to use the, our MLS forms.
You
I
don't
did.
have to.
I did.
I mean, if they're if they're an unrepresented buyer and they just want to get their own stuff, I would just kind of like
Yeah.
steer them to do their stuff. I mean, I I'm not the nicest person on that end, but like, I just, hey,
Bring
you'll
me
schedule
over.
your own inspections. Oh, you missed the inspection date? My bad, not my bad. Actually, that's your bad. So, I'm not going to like hold their hand along the way because my job is to protect myself.
Right.
Right? It's my job. Period. Very simple. And so when it comes down to it, I'm not being like, hey, I'm gonna be like, yo, you get your earnest money in yesterday? I don't have the confirmation of it, this and that. Great, you got that? Okay. Keep me posted.
Treat like a fire ticket.
Keep me posted. Let me know how it goes, right? I mean, and if you're, they don't get you the inspection reports at the same time, but now they're asking for $5,000 5 days later. I'm sorry, like, I'll talk to my sellers, but they have no obligation to do that. You already missed the time.
So they go to the Googler and they print out a random contract from, North Carolina.
Yeah, yeah,
And they write it out as best they can, and it doesn't have half the stuff that our offer has, and they're talking about closing attorneys and everything else that is different from our. How do you now representing the seller? Counter
Yeah.
that and clean it up? Do you just reject it, or do you counter with our offer and acceptance agreement?
you can go through and do that. I have used like professional publications that's missing a bunch of stuff. And I've actually countered and added in a bunch of Nevada law, and then also basically like they're hereby releasing, the seller as well as the, selling agent and broker of any, liability, like have fun, do your stuff. I mean, I'm gonna cover my seller, I'm gonna cover myself and the brokerage, but past that, I'm gonna let that be.
When the buyer or the offer normally protects the buyer more than the seller
Yeah.
anyway, so it's usually screwing them over by not using.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a little conscientious. I mean, if it's somebody who's unrepresented, I will counter them and just like give the laundry list of stuff that I'm gonna counter.
Right.
If they're unrepresented. Normally, if it's a buyer coming in, writing an offer that has a whole bunch of errors, a buyer agent, always call the agent and be like, hey, couple things. You missed like 90% of this stuff. Like, do you want to make corrections and resubmit it to me? Or do you want me to just write a counter offer and it's gonna make you look pretty bad for the client?
Right.
Like, no, you missed splitting escrow, or, who's paying escrow, who's paying transfer, who's
What's
paying this,
escrow?
who's paying that, I've done like bad, and you're like, I don't want to make you look bad.
Yeah.
Or I'm gonna send it to you and your client's gonna be so upset thinking that this huge counter offer, well, all I'm doing is just kind of fix your stuff.
Question.
On this thing, I had an offer that was so poorly written that my mentor, Shauna, was like, just ask them to rewrite it, like get in touch with their team lead and have them rewrite it. If someone submitted a form from North Carolina, can you just be like, hey, we're interested in your offer, but could you do it on a form that pertains to Nevada law?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So that would just kind of solve having to do all that. I've had to now send back a bunch of corrections to someone else that wrote a terrible offer. But it's easier, especially with an unrepresented buyer, just be like, can you just use the right form?
Yeah.
Please. You
I've
know?
read some terrible offers.
I,
All right.
When I